When Moses had told the spies to explore the land, what he had literally said to do was follow after it, let it take hold of their hearts, fall in love with it essentially, and let that give them courage to conquer all the obstacles that stood in the way. Whether it was the Edomites of Mount Seir, who made us go the long way around through the desert, or the schemings of Balaam, the prophet and the king of Moab, by the Arnon River Canyon. Moses himself didn't get to go into the land, but from Mount Nebo, which is actually in the nation of Jordan today, he was permitted to see it. This is the view we can get from there today. Today we can go into the land, so we're going to follow Joshua's footsteps into the land that is still promised, not to just one tribe, but eventually to all of Israel. After passing through Gilead, the additional land requested by the tribes of Reuben and Gad, we cross the Jordan River and enter Israel proper. Very close to this bridge, the water parted when the priests started crossing, being blocked off further upstream. It's one of the few times we're overtly given the scientific explanation for the miracle. The Jordan, or Yarden, is not very big, which scandalized the leprous Naaman and amused Henry Kissinger with what public relations could do for a river. But it is important, as a boundary marking a higher level of holiness. It flows through the Great Rift Valley, called the Arava, or Transitional Zone in Hebrew. And from this direction too, we physically rise higher very soon after we enter the land. The mountain where Rahab told the two spies to hide from the soldiers is only a short distance west of the first city Joshua conquered. Jericho is a very large oasis, thought to be the oldest continuing settlement in the world. Nearly 5 centuries earlier, Abraham had shown the Canaanites a better way, but they didn't change their practices, so now, 70 times 7 years after the first warning, Yahweh wouldn't let the disease spread any further. This is a living land that needs its rest and spits out inhabitants who go too far in corrupting it. Joshua's base camp for the conquest was here in Gilgal. Even though the treaty he had made with them was a mistake, he honored his commitment to the inhabitants of Gib'on and chased the 5 Amorite armies that ganged up on them westward down this descent of Beth-Horon, which would later divide the northern kingdom from the southern. Benjamin's land on the left, Ephraim's on the right. Joshua pushed those kings back into the Ayalon Valley, a better battleground, and when he was running out of daylight, Yahweh honored his faithfulness to his word by letting the sun stay in the enemy's eyes until he completed his victory. The same mountain pass he took would later be strategic in the Maccabees' battles against the Greeks, who tried to impose their pagan culture on the Jews. Hanukkah celebrates the temple's rededication after the Jews won against all odds. They started their revolt in nearby Modi'in. Just over the hill from Modi'in is the Biblical Landscape Museum of Ne'ot Kedemim, where every type of flora and fauna found in the Bible is being restored to its natural context. Here you'll learn things like why it's significant that in the kingdom to come, everyone will be able to sit under his own vine and his own fig tree. Both of these crops require attention every day during the harvest. They can only be properly tended in peacetime. A wine press was always found close to the vineyards, since they couldn't transport the grapes far without losing a lot of juice. Gershon Ferenczi, a vintner from the priestly line of Aaron, tells us how Israel's agriculture is unique.
Or you get a lot of wind, cold and wet, the flowers will be blown off. And if the flower gets blown off, then there's simply no fruit. This is a part of the reason why I believe that there are no atheists in a farm, not just in a foxhole. I mean, farmers realize, you're involved day by day with what's going on, and you realize that these things don't happen by accident. Eretz Yisrael is compared to Mitzrayim, to Egypt. But in Egypt, the agriculture was all based on the Nile River. And the Nile River, once a year, overflows its banks, spreads its water on the farm fields, brings all the nutrients to the fields and all of the water. And when the water goes down, so then that's when they start to plant. But this is something that happens on schedule every year. The Nile rises and floods. Eretz Yisrael, on the other hand, doesn't have a lot of water. And we are completely dependent on the winter rains. Sometimes there's lots of winter rains, and other times there's not so many winter rains. Like, it's considered a blessing that in Eretz Yisrael we are dependent on the rains, and not like Egypt, which is the Nile. Because the Nile overflows regularly, and in Israel it doesn't rain regularly. So why is that considered a blessing? You would think it's the opposite, that Egypt has the blessing because it comes regularly. But our rabbis explain, no. The fact that it's dependent on the rain, and the rain is dependent on our prayers, that's considered a blessing. Because you see the direct cause and effect, that you're a partner in the creation, so to speak.